Two glamorous fantasy women accept a heaping bag of sugar, which is somehow enough to make Wataru stare like reality just rage quit. Though this very strange business deal starts with something much less exciting. A shopkeeper asks whether one ordinary-looking bag matches what he wants to exchange, and Wataru nervously confirms that the 5 gold coins on the counter are payment. The smiling merchant explains that pure sugar is valuable enough to justify every coin, seals the deal with a handshake and leaves his stunned customer holding serious money. Wataru thanks him politely while still struggling to process his sudden upgrade, because that single sack has just become more cash than he has ever carried. 1 hour earlier, he had been walking home with the exact opposite problem: no money, an empty stomach, and the exhausted sigh of a broke freelancer. This is 20-year-old Wataru Sakai, a man living alone and barely keeping things together, whose latest visit to a client ends with another disappointing trip through his neighborhood. Work has been scarce, worthwhile encounters even scarcer, and his wallet is taking critical damage, until something beside the road catches his attention. A small Jizo statue sits neglected inside its shelter with an empty offering bowl, and Wataru remembers his grandmother telling him never to ignore such a shrine. He recalls how she always treated Jizo with care, so the lonely little statue immediately starts working on his conscience. Grandma also warned him that the divine can be surprisingly close, which is enough to make Wataru stop, clean the shelter, and straighten everything up. He even leaves his precious bag of sugar as an offering, regretting the loss almost instantly because generosity does not make hunger any quieter. As he turns away, the shrine begins making a very suspicious humming sound, and a brilliant flash spills out before he can reconsider his life choices. Wataru shields his eyes from the impossible light, but when it fades, the familiar street has vanished completely. He now stands in a bustling town filled with old European buildings, where merchants, travelers, and animal-eared residents wander around like this is perfectly normal. Wataru wonders whether he is dreaming, because that explanation feels less ridiculous than the alternative, yet the pain from pinching himself is annoyingly real. The sensation confirms that his body came along for this bizarre field trip, leaving him to ask whether he can somehow get home from here. He pauses, takes a breath, and decides panic can wait until after basic reconnaissance, since the shrine may still be his only obvious exit. Looking around carefully, he tries to organize the situation without attracting attention and reaches toward the spot where the portal seemed to appear. Darkness curls around his outstretched hand, swallowing it for one alarming second before the familiar world snaps back into place. Wataru celebrates his return, then immediately realizes he has learned something enormous. Touching the shrine lets him cross between Earth and that fantasy town, instead of running home. Curiosity wins and sends him right back, because apparently discovering interdimensional travel is just another errand now. He strolls into the other world determined to look around, passing an adventurer's guild, a warrior's guild, and enough signs to confirm the fantasy setting. Even the guild district looks exactly like something designed for an RPG protagonist, while nearby shops advertise monster materials and ordinary goods. Wataru wants to explore everything, but his empty pockets quickly spoil the tour, and he realizes questions alone will not pay for food. A few elegant women pass while discussing merchandise, giving him an idea products from Earth might sell for far more here. He steps toward a promising storefront, the Welcome Trading Company, though he has no clue what its shelves actually need. Deciding that asking costs nothing, Wataru enters and requests an appraisal, while a bell announces the arrival of one extremely underprepared businessman. The owner greets him with theatrical enthusiasm and introduces the store as welcome, then asks what sort of business brings Wataru inside. Wataru admits he wants something purchased and checks whether the merchant can help, which the cheerful man confirms without hesitation. The shop buys as well as sells, so the owner invites him to present the goods. Although Wataru's plain clothes and empty hands do not inspire immediate confidence, the merchant studies this unusual customer in silence, prompting Wataru to ask whether something about him looks wrong. Instead, the man wants a closer look at the bag Wataru carried through the portal, and the awkward inspection briefly turns into a comedy of personal space. Once the merchant confirms the white contents are salt, Wataru corrects him: the perfectly clean crystals are actually sugar. That answer changes everything because refined sugar is apparently rare merchandise in this town, so the owner carefully lifts the bag with both hands. Wataru recognizes the intense appraisal face of someone who has just spotted profit, while the merchant asks permission to verify the claim. He pinches out a tiny sample, tastes it, and freezes as the sweetness lands with maximum dramatic efficiency. The owner declares the purity and flavor extraordinary, surprising Wataru with just how valuable one supermarket staple can become. Wataru offers to sell the entire bag, expecting a modest amount because it originally cost only a few hundred yen. The merchant's proposed price wipes that expectation clean off his face. Bringing the story back to the 5 glittering coins on the counter, Wataru completes the sale and thanks him, but before leaving, the owner asks whether he came alone. Wataru admits he has no local connections and no established business, so the merchant quietly considers another opportunity. He explains that newcomers need trustworthy help if they plan to trade safely, and suggests purchasing a slave during their next transaction. Wataru nearly chokes on the word, though the merchant insists it is an ordinary arrangement here and bows goodbye. Outside, Wataru stares at the referral note while questioning the ethics of his new world, yet he accepts that the shopkeeper seemed sincerely concerned for his safety. The letter recommends a specific slave dealer, whose address and introduction should keep Wataru from being treated like an easy mark. He thanks the merchant again and heads off, using the included map to navigate toward a business he never expected to visit. The words slave shop still sound absurdly sinister, but curiosity and practical caution bring him to a large building anyway. Armed guards stand outside the imposing entrance, where Wataru presents his letter and explains that welcome sent him. One guard silently opens the door, and Wataru steps inside with the nervous expression of someone entering a final boss lobby. The spacious, luxurious reception hall is nothing like the grim, cage-filled place he imagined, and a sharply dressed woman appears so suddenly that Wataru nearly jumps out of his skin. She introduces herself as Marta and recognizes Welcome's recommendation, then asks what kind of slave he wants and what work they would perform. Marta decides her guest has excellent luck, because the shop just received unusually capable stock and can provide a private viewing. She leads Wataru upstairs, explaining that the recommended candidates are waiting together in the next room. Inside, several women stand in neat rows while their prospective buyer tries not to malfunction, but Marta immediately singles out two striking young women. Both are healthy, trained, and attractive enough to leave Wataru painfully aware of the sales strategy, though he forces himself to keep a respectable face. Marta assures him every candidate has received proper instruction, while Wataru quietly wonders how someone this beautiful ended up for sale. The first woman steps forward, and he tries very hard to focus on her abilities instead of her appearance. Her confident smile does not make that task easier, especially when her revealing outfit comes with what Marta calls outstanding style. The cat-eared woman is tall, athletic, and impossible to overlook, so Marta gives Wataru a moment before continuing the actual introduction. She belongs to the Golden Tiger Beastfolk and is strongly recommended as a personal guard, introducing herself as E and proudly claiming mastery of every sword style. Her sharp hearing and night vision are useful too, while her combat record makes her the strongest warrior of her entire clan. Wataru accepts that she is both gorgeous and genuinely dangerous, as E grins with the easy confidence of someone who knows exactly how impressive she is. Her powerful legs suggest explosive speed, and the rest of her athletic build promises more muscle than her playful pose admits. Wataru finds the description persuasive, but asks Marta to explain the second candidate before he makes any decision. Marta says the other woman can perform advanced magic, although a serious accident left her unable to speak and destroyed her confidence. Wataru asks whether buying such powerful people carries special danger, and Marta explains that magically enforced contracts prevent betrayal or deliberate harm. Their lives are bound to obedience once purchased, so she promises he will remain safe even if his servants are far stronger. That assurance is a relief, though Wataru still cannot ignore how grim the arrangement sounds, and he decides to hear the price before pretending he understands the system. Marta smoothly returns to business, but first warns that this particular pair presents one unusual complication. E and the silent mage refuse to be separated, meaning anyone who wants one must purchase both. Marta offers the pair for 4 silver coins and 9 large copper coins, while E confirms she will not abandon the only companion she trusts. Wataru stares at the two beautiful women and performs the shortest budget calculation of his life, then announces that he will buy them both. Marta's smile becomes downright predatory, but Wataru accepts that his wallet has walked voluntarily into this trap. She explains the written agreement and asks whether he can read the local script, which he cannot, though the merchant's referral gives Marta enough reason to proceed honestly. Taxes are added to the purchase price, and Wataru exhales as the final amount consumes nearly everything he just earned. The rules around money are still a mystery, but the contract appears in a language he can somehow understand once he concentrates. Marta presents the completed document, reminding him that damaging his new servants without cause would make him responsible as their owner. With the formalities finished, Wataru leaves the guarded building, suddenly poorer in coins but accompanied by 2 people whose futures now depend on him. The silent blonde thanks her new master with a polite bow and promises devoted service, while E cheerfully vows to protect him from every enemy at full power. Wataru realizes his first purchase has become a very serious responsibility, then finds both women staring at him and waits for the awkwardness to win. He gathers his courage, asks them to relax and says they should stop acting so frightened around him. Since this is his first time owning slaves, he wants them to teach him what they need, and that simple concern makes both women brighten immediately. Wataru asks what he should call the silent woman, then makes one thing clear: he wants honest communication even without spoken words. She looks uncertain but seems willing to trust him, while E confirms she feels fine and reassures her companion. Wataru explains that they can tell him whenever something is wrong, and E points out that their clothing and belongings are still back at the shop. The 2 women worry they may have created trouble already, but the blonde calmly promises she has no intention of complaining. E gives the same eager answer, allowing Wataru to celebrate surviving his first conversation as a master. A more practical crisis remains, however. He has no local house and barely enough money for lodging, so he tells them to collect their things and meet him again. He will wait at the shop while they prepare. Though E's wide-eyed reaction suggests she finds this plan deeply suspicious, Wataru assures himself everything will work out and watches the women hurry upstairs together before he slips away. He checks that they are out of sight, activates the shrine route, and vanishes from the fantasy town right as both women realize he is missing. Back on Earth, Wataru waits beside the Jizo with the dark portal closing behind him. While E and her companion fear their new master has abandoned them, the strange darkness opens again, and Wataru returns after only a short delay, casually greeting two extremely startled women. Night has fallen here because time passes differently between the worlds, but he asks them to trust him and keep the route home absolutely secret. The silent woman recognizes the portal as an advanced form of ancient transfer magic, privately concluding that her master must be an extraordinary mage. Wataru dodges that flattering misunderstanding and insists the details are complicated, then invites them to follow him somewhere safe. The pair exchange one wary glance, before crossing into an unfamiliar modern neighborhood beside their suspiciously ordinary master. Wataru leads them to his rented apartment, warning that the place is small and the nighttime rules will seem strange. He unlocks the door while admitting that bachelor housekeeping has not exactly been heroic, yet bringing two women home gives him a sudden motivation upgrade. Wataru welcomes them inside and proudly announces that this modest apartment is now their home, prompting both women to freeze at the sight of a completely unfamiliar modern interior. He begins with the sacred rule of Japanese entryways: shoes come off before anyone steps inside, and E happily praises the strange but clean custom. The blonde woman follows quietly while Wataru tries not to overthink sharing a home with them, especially after years of living and working alone. His apartment was designed for one person, and the single bed creates an immediate logistical problem with three residents. Wataru decides a larger bed and extra furniture will be necessary, but furnishing the apartment means spending more money after draining his fantasy world savings. He still has a little Earth cash and a credit card, so he orders a fold-out sofa and other essentials while the women watch in amazement. Their fascination with the glowing screen makes Wataru briefly resemble a legendary artifact dealer, although back home he is merely a man shopping online in sweatpants. He worries about taking them through busy modern streets, then decides tonight should focus on food, rest, and teaching them the basics. When Wataru announces that they must share the available sleeping space, E immediately starts fluffing the bed with suspicious enthusiasm. Her tail swishes as she tests the mattress, while the silent woman sits beside her and waits for instructions. A sudden electronic chime startles them both, forcing Wataru to explain that ordinary household devices are not magical threats. The women admit they cannot cook with this world's tools, so he demonstrates the refrigerator, microwave, sink, stove, and several other everyday miracles. E and her companion stare as if the kitchen deserves its own adventure rank, and the silent woman becomes dizzy trying to memorize everything at once. Wataru assures her there is no rush, noting that magic and plumbing are simply different solutions to the same daily problems. He says they can learn gradually while helping wherever their skills are useful, and E wonders whether he plans to make them work in the fantasy town. Wataru explains that he wants to trade goods between both worlds, using their knowledge to identify profitable products and their strength to keep everyone safe. The women accept without hesitation, while he orders dinner from his phone and leaves modern commerce to do the cooking. Once everyone is seated, Wataru explains why he bought two slaves instead of one. Living alone had grown lonely and dependable companions could help him build something better. He reaches for the silent woman's hand, asking both women to protect themselves and help keep the household secure. He initially assumes he only wants obedient labor, but Wataru says he needs partners whose judgment can cover what he does not know. The blonde points out that neither woman has much formal education, yet their world knowledge is exactly the expertise Wataru lacks. He calls that knowledge equally valuable, leaving both women puzzled by a master who treats their experience as real intelligence. Wataru admits Earth is technologically superior in many ways, while the fantasy world possesses magic and materials his home has never seen. E and her companion finally understand their job is to bridge those two sets of strengths, and their relieved smiles tell Wataru the pitch worked. He outlines the business model: sell Earth goods there, bring rare fantasy products back, and improve life for all three of them. The women listen with growing excitement, promising to share every useful idea and guard him during dangerous trips. Wataru encourages them to settle into Earth life first, because he considers meeting these two his best fortune since discovering the portal. The blonde blushes at his sincerity, while E answers with a bright grin that removes any remaining doubt. Both women declare that they feel lucky too, and Wataru finally relaxes enough to prepare for bed. He says they will shop for necessities tomorrow, when a soft, sweet scent from the bedding catches his attention. Wataru reaches toward the blanket, discovering fabric far warmer and softer than anything he remembers owning. He wonders whether exhaustion is playing tricks on him, just before E slides close and turns the mystery into a much more immediate problem. Wataru questions whether he is dreaming, but the very real weight beside him answers before his brain can. E wraps herself around her new master, trapping him in a hug that is affectionate, powerful, and slightly hazardous to breathing. Her warm body and flicking tail make escape difficult, so Wataru orders himself to calm down before the situation gets ridiculous. He attempts to create some distance, but E clings tighter as if personal space were an enemy combat technique. Wataru jolts in alarm, straining against strength that confirms every claim Marta made about his new bodyguard. E sleepily insists the softest pillow belongs to her, while Wataru wonders whether the entire encounter is an extremely vivid fantasy. His embarrassment reaches critical levels, and one desperate shove finally launches him free of the cuddle lock. Wataru lands breathless on the floor, barely catches himself, and decides surviving tonight requires a safer sleeping arrangement. He protests as he retreats, while Wataru sits drenched in sweat and pretends this was a normal household negotiation. She eventually releases him and returns to bed, leaving Wataru muttering that her cheerful face hides terrifying physical power. He also wonders whether the slave contract encourages this kind of closeness, then decides unconscious influence is possible but not an excuse to exploit either woman. By 8:05 the next morning, Wataru has slept far later than usual, and E wakes him with a casual greeting. He opens his eyes slowly, only to find her leaning over him again and immediately forget how mornings work. E cheerfully notes that he looks awake, while Wataru tries to understand why she is still occupying his personal orbit. Apparently the sofa bed felt cramped after the blonde joined them, so E migrated during the night and left part of her sleepwear behind. Wataru points out the missing pajama bottoms, and E finally notices her wardrobe malfunction with a deeply delayed blush. He turns away before the situation becomes even more awkward, insisting that she get properly dressed. Wataru also tells her to wash her face and put on underwear, which he will provide before they start the day's shopping expedition. He shuffles off in mortified silence, proving even the strongest warrior can lose to basic pajamas, while Wataru closes the door and assumes the household's morning embarrassment is finally over. A faint sound from the bedroom makes him turn back, where he discovers the silent blonde Mariel. Sitting awake with her face blazing red, Wataru asks whether she slept at all, but Mariel looks down and refuses to explain what she has been waiting for. Her nervous expression only deepens the mystery, and she manages a tiny morning greeting before hiding behind her hair. Wataru answers carefully, noticing that her whole face is red even though she does not seem sick. He claims nothing happened. While Wataru quietly suspects the two women discuss some custom he completely missed, he starts guessing whether the room was too cold or the bed uncomfortable, until Mariel admits she stayed awake expecting him to call her during the night. The implication finally clicks, and Wataru realizes she thought he had been summoned first for intimate duties. Mariel apologizes for the misunderstanding, but Wataru tells her she never has to provide that kind of service. His blunt reassurance embarrasses both of them, though Mariel visibly relaxes once she understands that sharing a home carries no hidden demand. Wataru explains that he only wandered over while asleep, and Mariel finally crawls under the blanket after losing an entire night to unnecessary anxiety. E returns from washing up, sees her companion collapsing into bed, and realizes exactly what Mariel assumed. Wataru repeats that no one will be ordered into his bed, apologizing if his words or sleeping arrangements created the wrong impression. Mariel insists the mistake was hers, while Wataru worries that rejecting them too strongly might sound like another kind of insult. He settles for promising that everyone can sleep safely, then tells the exhausted Mariel to rest as long as she needs. She thanks her gentle master and asks to resume work tomorrow, giving Wataru the satisfied smile of a man who has barely defused a romance-shaped bomb. With both women resting, he prepares breakfast, reflecting that living together requires more emotional care than his solitary life ever did. By morning, Wataru decides the best reset is food, and starts cooking while Mariel watches closely enough to learn the routine. He chops ingredients, brews coffee, and turns a few ordinary groceries into a surprisingly cheerful meal. E and Mariel dig in with delighted expressions, savoring every unfamiliar flavor as if breakfast were a royal banquet. Wataru enjoys their reactions and lets himself believe this strange household might actually work. After eating, he finishes his freelance tasks while both women nap off their overwhelming first day, then wakes them for a shopping trip. Mariel rises slowly, while E stretches with the dramatic enthusiasm of a cat who owns the entire apartment. Wataru clears his desk, prepares a list, and decides they need clothes, cookware, bedding, and daily necessities. He had planned a simple outing, but leading two conspicuously beautiful foreigners through a crowded mall attracts attention everywhere. Shopping bags multiply at an alarming rate, and Wataru finally drags the haul home after surviving questions, stares, and too many aisles. Mariel praises the enormous shopping center, which Wataru identifies as a popular home goods store with almost everything they needed. She carries cookware and practical supplies, while E hugs a rice cooker and enough bags to look like she conquered retail personally. Wataru studies the receipt, briefly wondering whether the giant appliances and cosmetics section defeated his original budget. The women ask if they bought too much, but he announces that their next trip will take them back to the fantasy world. Both agree eagerly, until Wataru remembers they already own more outfits than he expected and calls off further shopping. The fantasy clothing leaves generous room around E's tail, while Earth fashion requires careful sizing and several adjustments for both women. E proudly models an outfit altered for her body, and Wataru admits that buying everything at once was chaotic but necessary. The household is now equipped for comfortable daily life, so he packs a selection of Earth goods intended for resale. E and Mariel stare at the bag with sudden curiosity, before the trio returns to the Jizo shrine and activates the portal. Wataru jokingly apologizes for leaving the neglected statue dirty again, then leads both women through the darkness into their own world. They emerge safely, and Wataru decides to explore the town properly instead of rushing straight to welcome. A grand stone church dominates the street, which Mariel identifies as a temple devoted to the sun god Hefo. Wataru notes that religion may shape trade and law here, but postpones the history lesson so they can inspect the surrounding shops. The lively district is packed with merchants and travelers, while Mariel explains that the town thrives on river shipping and access to the royal capital. Wataru admits he never asked the town's name, earning a stunned pause from both guides. Mariel identifies it as a busy trading city near the capital, and Wataru asks whether she has visited other towns. She quietly admits slavery kept her from traveling freely, prompting him to apologize for asking before he understood her past. He pulls him closer and says neither woman blames him, while Mariel asks them to keep moving before the street notices the emotional huddle. Wataru regains his composure, asks he to carry the pack, and reminds both women to watch for profitable merchandise. Mariel stays alert despite her lost sleep, while Wataru asks whether they know a dependable shop for household goods. E and Mariel consult each other, then recommend a nearby second-hand dealer where ordinary travelers can bargain safely. E grabs Mariel's hand and declares they should try it, bringing Wataru to a cluttered storefront filled with tools, containers, and used equipment. The three step inside, where the quiet shopkeeper studies their group without offering any welcome. He finds an impressive cauldron, but Mariel warns that its high quality probably means an equally impressive price. Wataru refuses to waste money merely because a pot looks heroic, and asks the nervous clerk whether anything affordable would serve the same purpose, but the store has nothing that offers both good quality and a sensible price. Wataru decides to leave rather than get tricked. While E and Mariel reassure him that a crowded specialty shop would be more reliable, he accepts their advice, noting that the previous night's excitement may still be making him unusually careless. With the purchase postponed, Wataru remembers a more important stop and leads the women back to Welcome Trading Company. Both companions brighten at the prospect, though they are surprised to learn the famous shop began as a modest general store. Welcome's owner built connections with skilled guilds and gradually expanded his business, which Mariel agrees is an impressive success story. Wataru asks whether the merchant has enough influence to become a major regional dealer, and decides he wants the cheerful older man on his side. He also needs to introduce E and Mariel properly, so he steps inside and is immediately recognized. The merchant welcomes Wataru with delighted theatrics, and Wataru apologizes for arriving unannounced during business hours. He presents Mariel and E as the two servants purchased through the referral, prompting the merchant to admire Marta's matchmaking skills. Wataru credits Welcome's recommendation for the successful purchase, but the merchant suddenly mentions another promising matter they should discuss tomorrow. Before Wataru can respond, something inside the shop catches everyone's attention, and the merchant abruptly asks them to wait. He thanks Wataru for the earlier sugar, then pulls aside a curtain and ushers the whole group into a private room. Welcome offers refreshments and asks whether Wataru brought more of the rare white crystals, while Wataru notices the friendly greeting has become a serious negotiation. He answers that additional stock may be available, and the merchant explains that he grew up poor and has worked since childhood. Determined to stand on his own, he learned customer service, bookkeeping, and trade until wealthy patrons finally trusted him. Some still dismissed his humble birth, so he built Welcome around one rule: serve every honest customer with respect. That reputation transformed a tiny storefront into a growing company, and he now intends to establish a shop anyone can enter without intimidation. Wataru understands why the merchant treated a poorly dressed stranger fairly, but wonders how this history connects to today's urgent request. The owner places Wataru's sugar on the table, explaining that its brilliant white color and uniform crystals are beyond local craftsmanship. No trader in the region handles anything so pure, making this transaction a rare chance for Welcome to impress powerful buyers. The merchant has already circulated samples, though uncertainty about Wataru's supply makes accepting large orders risky. His first goal is securing a long-term contract with the territory's ruling household, whose estate stands beyond the town. Wataru looks up as the merchant reveals the client, a wealthy noble who wants the finest sugar available without delay. The buyer is influential and notoriously selective, and the merchant confirms that negotiations are already underway. He calls Wataru's product the highest quality sugar he has ever encountered. While the noble's handsome representative, Lord Hebroth, has both money and demanding standards, for roughly 25 years his family has dominated the area's trade, and control of sugar would further strengthen that position. The representative studies the sample with barely concealed interest, then lifts a polished crystal into the light. Its beauty alone surprises him, while the flawless whiteness proves there are no visible impurities. He asks the merchant to name his price, but the calculation makes even this wealthy customer pause. The representative considers whether such perfection is worth the premium, as Welcome waits with the calm expression of someone holding the only supply. The noble knows refined sugar will sell among aristocrats, yet he wants the true source before committing to a contract. Welcome refuses to reveal Wataru immediately, because exposing his supplier could let the powerful household bypass the shop. The representative reacts sharply, but Welcome sweetens the refusal by offering 100 gold coins for the available stock. The number sounds absurdly high, although the merchant insists sugar prices fluctuate and future terms must follow the market. Imported sugar already functions like precious cargo, so an unmatched product can command astonishing margins despite the risk. The representative understands the argument, taps the table and decides this opportunity is too valuable to abandon. He leaves to secure the required funds, while Welcome requests additional stock and promises another payment once it arrives. Wataru thanks him, but privately wonders whether their business has just attracted dangerous attention. The noble wants a reliable supply route, whereas Welcome can only promise periodic deliveries without revealing the source. They agree to proceed cautiously, because the representative could easily pressure a lone merchant if the profits become large enough. Even buying more earth sugar carries risk, yet Wataru trusts Welcome to protect the secret as long as both sides benefit. The merchant bows deeply after the customer leaves, frustrated by nobles who still treat common-born traders as disposable. He clenches one hand, vowing not to let Wataru become another tool for the ruling class. The next day, Welcome hosts Wataru again behind the same curtain, seats him at a formal table and offers tea while they wait. Wataru thanks him, accepts the cup and notices a sweet herbal aroma he has never smelled before. The drink is made from leaves Welcome obtained through another trade, producing a clean, refreshing flavor and a pleasant finish. Wataru praises it sincerely, so Welcome suggests adding sugar to see how the flavors combine. He drops in a small spoonful, and Wataru tastes the result, pleasantly surprised by the smoother sweetness. Welcome carefully explains the leaf's origin and uses before an attendant interrupts with urgent news. The royal capital's guards have been attacked and the incident may affect every merchant in town, although Welcome finishes praising the tea before turning fully to the troubling report. Wataru asks what happened, and learns that armed robberies have increased while suitable weapons have become difficult to find. The merchant believes every traveler should prepare, but Wataru admits he has no idea how to choose or handle a weapon. Welcome says several options remain, including locally made blades and equipment that may take time to obtain. One supplier is only 2 days away by boat, while another can deliver higher quality goods from the royal capital in 3 days. Wataru thanks him and asks what would best suit E, whose sudden silence makes Mariel glance nervously toward her companion. E hesitates, so Wataru asks for her honest opinion instead of choosing for her. She looks startled by the invitation and finally asks whether he truly means to buy her a weapon. Wataru confirms it without fuss, while E struggles with the idea that a master would value a slave's preference. Her former owners treated her as equipment and punished independent choices, so she assumes kindness must hide some test. Wataru simply repeats that the weapon belongs in her hands, and E's guarded expression begins to crack. She remembers losing her treasured sword when she was enslaved, a blade tied to her clan that she never expected to see again. Wataru decides he does not want her living without hope, and waits patiently while she finds the courage to answer. He asks her to show him exactly what she wants, prompting Mariel to explain that E once carried an exceptional arena weapon. Mariel believes it may still be with the dealer who sold them, and E reacts with sudden hope at the possibility. She describes the distinctive sword, confirming it was a cherished weapon rather than some replaceable tool. The blade was sold when she became a slave, so Wataru gently rests a hand on her head and promises to recover it if possible. He thanks her for finally speaking honestly, and tells her that wanting something important is not selfish. Mariel smiles at E's stunned reaction. While Wataru offers a choice between reclaiming the old sword and purchasing a new one, E whispers that she wants her own weapon back, even though she knows a rare blade could be extremely expensive. Wataru says money can be earned again, leaving E speechless as his priorities sink in. He adds that honesty matters more than acting obedient, and demands a little pride from the strongest warrior of her clan. E finally shouts that she wants the sword returned, then grabs Wataru in a grateful hug strong enough to threaten another rib-related incident. He pats her head while Mariel laughs, and both women realize their new life may actually be kinder than either expected. E remembers the blade was confiscated before the dealer received her, so Wataru asks Welcome whether a recovery is realistic. The merchant confirms the sword may still exist, especially if its unusual quality made the buyer hesitate to resell it. He offers to investigate and arrange a separate purchase, which earns Wataru's immediate gratitude. Welcome insists no apology is necessary, because helping reliable customers is simply how he conducts business. They shake hands on the search. While E quietly promises herself not to waste the chance Wataru created, Welcome writes down the weapon's description, and Wataru formally asks him to proceed. E answers a final question about the blade, then receives an important sealed letter related to its ownership. She clutches the document and vows never to let it go, hugging both Wataru and Mariel in a burst of happy relief. Welcome watches the reunion with an amused smile, until Wataru remembers one more piece of business. He stays close as he turns back to the merchant, who mentions her martial skill and the growing danger around town. Wataru knows she can fight barehanded, but training and instinct cannot replace proper equipment against armed enemies. Welcome then reveals that the noble customer wants a much larger sugar delivery, asking whether Wataru can prepare roughly 100 bags. The number nearly sends him through the ceiling, because acquiring that much retail sugar without looking suspicious will require planning. He admits an accident or supply problem could delay delivery, but Welcome says monster attacks already make uncertainty normal in this world. Wataru remembers his portal leaves him unusually protected from those transport risks, even while ordinary merchants must survive roads filled with raiders and creatures. That makes E's weapon even more important. And Wataru asks whether payment for the huge order can be handled safely. Welcome explains that normal deals use coins directly, with one bag of sugar currently valued near 10 gold pieces. For 100 bags, carrying the full payment would be absurd and dangerous, so merchants rely on signed vouchers issued through guilds or the government. Welcome outlines the system, while Wataru admits he has never used a bank or formal account in this kingdom. The vouchers function like checks and can be converted into coin by trusted institutions, allowing large contracts to move without wagons full of money. Wataru understands the principle, and Welcome offers to help establish the necessary account under his name. He appreciates the support but wonders how much trust the system deserves, especially when one merchant currently controls every part of his local business. Welcome promises to pay any verified voucher, then asks Wataru for a favor regarding the remaining balance. The request catches him off guard, but he listens as Welcome proposes a smaller initial order. Wataru recognizes that demanding full immediate payment could strain even this successful company, so he agrees to divide the delivery and record every amount carefully. He explains that the arrangement must remain fair to Welcome too, and the merchant bows in sincere relief. They settle on 10 to 20 bags first, leaving the giant 100-bag order for later, and Welcome agrees to pay for the first 10 bags in advance from company funds. Wataru feels uneasy about taking so much money before delivery, but the merchant promises a written contract and asks him to treat it as trust between partners. Wataru accepts while warning that he will not abuse the arrangement, so Welcome summons staff to prepare the paperwork immediately. During the wait, trays of sweets appear, and Wataru jokes that negotiations are becoming dangerously comfortable. They shake hands again. Then E and Mariel quietly marvel at how naturally their master handles an influential merchant. Mariel wonders whether Wataru is secretly far more important than he admits, because he has a home, rare merchandise, and enough confidence to negotiate without fear. E agrees that his gentle behavior does not match the arrogant rich men they knew, while Wataru remains blissfully unaware of the legend forming behind him. A clerk brings the finished agreement. Welcome signs his name and Wataru reviews every translated line carefully. He adds his own signature, completing a contract that advances their small experiment into serious international business. The first payment follows, accompanied by one more warning that the sugar must arrive in sealed, unchanged bags. Wataru admits he has possessed the stock from the beginning, but asks Welcome to exchange the payment quickly because holding so much coin feels unsafe. The merchant presents the agreed purchase sum, and Wataru braces himself as the heavy container reaches the table. This is his first direct payment from an individual on such a scale, roughly 100 gold coins weighing more than his excited expression anticipated. He casually takes the burden from him, while Wataru asks whether carrying it will be manageable. She lifts the fortune like a grocery bag, and his brain briefly compares her strength with the delicate pouch in her hand. Wataru requests another meeting after he obtains the sugar, admitting that repeated retail purchases on Earth may attract unwanted questions. Welcome notices his concern, bows, and promises the shop will always welcome him regardless of the delivery schedule. Wataru appreciates the flexibility, because a partner who avoids pressure is exactly what this bizarre operation needs. Welcome privately hopes Wataru will keep trusting him, then asks whether there are any other goods the company should seek. Wataru says he wants items suitable for trade with ordinary working people, not only luxurious products for nobles. The merchant proposes examining clothing, household tools, and inexpensive accessories, which brings Wataru's interest back immediately. E and Mariel lean closer as Welcome opens a large display case, filled with handmade goods that could be valuable on Earth. Wataru notices jewelry, ornaments, and small crafted pieces unlike anything sold in Japanese stores, and decides to search for products with clear resale value. Welcome explains that the current stock comes from several local workshops, while Wataru compares each piece with familiar Earth designs. The collection has grown slowly over years, and the merchant is delighted to see a customer examining overlooked inventory. He finds several beautiful items, though Mariel reminds her that business comes before grabbing everything shiny. She suggests they enjoy choosing together, and E happily agrees. Welcome laughs as the two women begin browsing, then asks Wataru whether they are his servants or his wives. Wataru denies the second possibility far too quickly, accidentally revealing that the question hit closer than he wanted. The merchant teases him about having two charming companions, and Wataru insists their relationship is professional. Behind him, E watches with an expression that suggests she heard every word, then slips close enough to make Wataru visibly nervous. She loops an arm around him, asks whether he will truly buy her new clothes, and smiles when he says yes. Mariel protests that E is taking advantage, but E argues both women need proper outfits for future trade. Wataru thanks Mariel for the reminder, agrees that suitable clothing is a legitimate business expense and earns an instant celebration. He notices both women handle negotiations better when excited, though their attention and closeness leave him embarrassingly pleased with himself. Mariel catches that smile, steps nearer and says their master must show better self-control in public. Her mock scolding only makes him blush harder, until Wataru wonders aloud whether having fun with them is somehow wrong. Mariel apologizes for teasing, but his ridiculous grin proves no harm was done. He declares that he looks like a shameless flirt, sending all three into laughter before business resumes. Welcome returns with a new assistant, introducing his wife Sandy as the person who will help select merchandise. Wataru is delighted to meet another member of the Welcome family, introduces himself with an enthusiastic handshake, and accidentally squeezes hard enough for Sandy to wince. She recovers gracefully and invites everyone to sit, while Wataru places himself between and Mariel on the ornate sofa. Sandy remarks that the women are exceptionally beautiful, teasing Wataru about his obvious good fortune. His embarrassment amuses everyone, but he finally asks Sandy to discuss budget and requirements. Wataru admits he understands almost nothing about women's clothing, so he leaves practical decisions to the three women. Sandy confirms that Mariel and need outfits suitable for service and travel, and Mariel promises to manage the wardrobe herself. Will continue as Wataru's guard, while Sandy recommends durable fabrics that still look elegant beside a merchant. Mariel agrees and requests materials that are easy to move in, prompting Wataru to set a budget and retreat before fashion destroys him again. Sandy looks surprised, then reveals that custom clothing requires a formal fitting contract. Wataru accepts without complaint, realizing he has somehow become the man telling beautiful women to shop without worrying about money, a sentence his former broke self would never believe. Sandy thanks them for the order and invites Mariel to begin the fitting, explaining that the most delicate outfits are reserved for evening or formal wear. Mariel follows her behind the changing curtain, where Sandy recommends pale colors with silver accents to suit her graceful appearance. Mariel prioritizes comfort and movement, while Wataru tells both women to choose freely rather than dress only for work. Sandy appreciates that answer, and Mariel finally relaxes enough to enjoy being measured. Outside, Wataru and wait on the sofa, listening to fabric rustle while curiosity slowly defeats their patience. Wataru wonders whether clothes can really take this long, when Sandy announces that Mariel's first trial outfit is ready. Cheers, and Sandy opens the curtain with the confidence of someone unveiling a masterpiece. Mariel steps forward in an elegant new dress, leaving shouting that she looks beautiful. Wataru agrees so sincerely that Mariel blushes, while he quietly remembers how nervous she looked when they first met. The new outfit makes her seem lighter and more confident, and Wataru wonders whether she finally enjoys being seen instead of evaluated. He nearly hugs her on impulse, but catches himself and praises Sandy's work instead. Sandy asks Mariel to try one more coordinated set, unveiling a charming maid-style outfit that balances formality and freedom of movement. Wataru approves the design, and helps Mariel adjust the unfamiliar ribbons and layers. Mariel worries the neckline is too revealing, while Wataru pretends his brain has not noticed the same issue. He compliments her respectfully, but his obvious nerves make Mariel ask what is wrong. Wataru insists the outfit looks fine and begs her not to pull at it in front of him, which only makes her more self-conscious. The finished ensemble is elegant and fitted, and Mariel tests the skirt with a small turn. Wataru struggles to find words, prompting her to address him with growing concern. She asks whether the dress is embarrassing, but his stunned expression finally convinces her the exact opposite is true. Wataru apologizes and calls her genuinely beautiful, sending another blush across her face. He enthusiastically declares Mariel the prettiest woman in the room, while Wataru says she may be the most beautiful person he has ever met. Sandy adjusts the last ribbon, and Mariel slowly accepts that the praise is sincere. She agrees to keep the outfit, so Sandy closes the curtain and announces that is next. Bounds forward as if the fitting were a tournament, while Wataru reminds her to pick something she actually likes. He says Mariel can help, but immediately chooses practical dark colors that will not show dirt during guard work. Sandy agrees that easy movement matters most, then takes measurements while Mariel watches with professional interest. Wataru decides the consultation is under control and asks Sandy to add any protective or enchanted accessories that may prove useful. She promises to check her stock, while Mariel looks delighted that her master treats fashion like another trade puzzle. Wataru admits she seems to enjoy shopping and invites her to choose personal items before they leave. The curtain opens again, revealing in a sleek black outfit that leaves Wataru completely unprepared. Asks how she looks, turning proudly so the flexible design and tall boots can be judged properly. She loves the fitted material, especially because nothing catches when she moves. Wataru admits the style is unexpectedly bold, while Mariel points out that beastfolk warriors value mobility over modesty. Notices his staring and steps closer, making Wataru wonder whether the innocent pose is actually strategic warfare. Mariel insists is teasing him, but Wataru blurts that both women are almost unfairly attractive. Beams at the compliment, while Wataru's face reaches a dangerous new shade of red. He admits she has many genuinely cute qualities, which earns a quiet smile from Mariel too. Sandy recommends practical accessories to complete each outfit, including a strength-enhancing bracelet and a hair ornament enchanted for improved focus. The women compare their final selections, and Sandy warns that high-quality moving parts and durable materials raise the price. Wataru thanks her and agrees to purchase everything they chose, then asks E to stay alert because the expensive package could attract thieves. She promises to watch for anyone approaching too closely, while both women admire the comfortable fit one last time. Wataru asks Sandy for the total, receiving 2 silver accessories and several tailored pieces at a price he considers surprisingly reasonable. Converted to yen, however, the handmade work is worth nearly 500,000, reminding him that fantasy craftsmanship is valuable enough to support another business. Sandy is pleased they selected quality goods, and welcome returns as Wataru prepares to leave. He thanks Wataru for the sugar order, mentions that Sandy enjoyed helping the women, and invites the whole group back whenever they need further fittings. Wataru agrees, but notices Sandy watching him with a thoughtful expression. She asks E and Mariel to step aside for one more clothing suggestion, leaving both women suspiciously silent as they follow. Wataru tells them not to worry, and the women disappear through the side door with Sandy. Welcome thanks him for taking the discussion seriously, then reveals that the capital's authorities want merchant cooperation in stopping the growing robberies, although Welcome will never force Wataru to accept a dangerous public role. Wataru goes quiet, because becoming visibly involved could expose both his body and his secret supply route. The authorities have already approached established merchants, and anyone accustomed to handling weapons may be asked to assist. Welcome says refusal is possible, but a trustworthy guard could earn Wataru useful connections and protection. He admits he has his own capable defender, though volunteering E without a proper sword would be wildly irresponsible. Welcome agrees there is no need to rush, and urges Wataru to prioritize quality goods rather than sugar alone. If other problems arise, they can discuss them privately before anyone makes commitments, which Wataru accepts with relief. Welcome calls him an important partner, and their meeting ends with another firm handshake. E and Mariel emerge carrying their completed purchases, while the shop bell announces the trio's departure. Welcome and Sandy cheerfully invite them back, leaving Wataru impressed by how smoothly the couple manages both business and people. The three walk into the busy street, briefly falling silent as the weight of their growing plans catches up with them. Wataru notices the women exchanging glances, then realizes the packages are heavier and more numerous than expected. E brightens at once, and Mariel volunteers to carry part of the load before he can object. Wataru divides the bags, entrusting the heaviest pieces to E and lighter items to Mariel. Both thank him for buying so much. But Wataru admits his spending has become reckless since discovering Fantasy World Gold. He has never managed this kind of wealth, and constantly calculating prices across 2 currencies is more stressful than the shopping itself. E and Mariel promise to help keep track, though Wataru notices a wooden sword displayed near the road. He points it out as a possible training substitute, and Mariel recalls Sandy mentioning a nearby accessory shop. E agrees to wait for her real sword, trusting Wataru's promise while Mariel quietly keeps him from wandering toward every interesting display. He asks them to be patient, and E accepts another reassuring pat on the head. The trio continues through town with their purchases, then returns to Earth after Wataru finally gets a good night's sleep. They approach the Jizo shrine together, touch the portal, and cross back into the fantasy street. Today's destination is Marta's slave shop, where Wataru hopes to learn more about E's missing sword. The guards recognize him and allow the group through the same imposing entrance. Wataru thanks them for remembering him, then greets Marta while E and Mariel stand close behind. Marta welcomes her former merchandise with a teasing smile, asking whether their new master has caused any trouble. Both women insist they are satisfied, which Marta finds suspiciously wholesome. Wataru says Sandy at Welcome helped them choose the attractive new outfits, and Marta compliments the results while enjoying his obvious embarrassment. She invites them upstairs, spreads documents across the table, and begins reviewing the weapons trail. Marta recognizes the description, then asks them to compare the contract and customer ledger. Everyone sits around the private table, where Marta confirms a famous Golden Tiger warrior once owned a similar sword. Wataru bolts upright, realizing that a distinctive clan blade should be far easier to trace than ordinary merchandise. E's arena reputation may actually strengthen their bargaining position, and Wataru gives her an encouraging look. He thanks Marta for the useful lead, while E throws an excited arm around him again. Mariel predicts they will need careful negotiations with whoever currently owns the weapon, because rare swords often pass through nobles, collectors, and auction houses. Marta cannot identify the present owner from her records, so Wataru proposes meeting intermediaries directly rather than waiting indefinitely. She chuckles at his determination, then explains that broad merchant networks require skilled brokers and persistent correspondence. Marta offers to provide introductions, warning that Wataru's cheerful optimism may encounter some very stubborn aristocrats. He answers with his usual confidence, while Marta unfolds a large map and marks the relevant trading routes. Wataru studies the unfamiliar geography, trying to decide where the search should begin. He asks how far Marta is willing to help, and her calculating glance returns to the documents. She admits the shop watches many customers, because buying slaves responsibly requires knowing where they can live and work safely. Marta claims she determines a fair value for every person, then protects the ones she considers important even after a sale. Wataru understands that her warmth and ruthless business sense are part of the same system, and Marta says she genuinely welcomes owners who treat slaves well. He thanks her for that protection, promising to return with any introductions or evidence that can advance the search. Marta says that is enough, and the trio rises to leave. Wataru still has Welcom's sealed referral, so he asks Mariel whether it contains any additional route information. She says the easiest lead lies outside the current town, in territory stretching between the royal capital and another major city. Mariel studied regional agriculture and commerce before enslavement, revealing an education Wataru never expected from her quiet manner. She explains that noble lands generate crops, livestock, and minerals, making effective estate management essential for both taxes and merchant supply. Specialty products and river trade matter most, so Wataru decides he should eventually buy land and build a stable source of goods. He asks whether Mariel can help evaluate territory, and she shyly admits she studied that exact subject at school. Wataru lights up at the discovery, while the trio heads through town discussing how her knowledge could shape their plans. Mariel's family circumstances prevented her from using that education, but she now hopes to make it useful as Wataru's partner. He apologizes for not asking sooner, then declares that his next major decision will follow Mariel's expert explanation. She recommends purchasing familiar goods with reliable demand, since a beginner with money should avoid complicated territory speculation. Wataru agrees that getting carried away would only make him an easy target, though he still wants to earn serious money by finding rare products between worlds. He outlines the immediate plan: buy unusual but useful fantasy goods, then sell them on Earth where their craftsmanship and materials can stand out. E and Mariel answer with matching enthusiasm, while Wataru remembers that yen is currently his weakest resource. Supporting 3 people has increased expenses, so every purchase must eventually create a reliable source of income. The trio resumes browsing the commercial district, where a sword display reminds Wataru that weapons themselves may have resale value. He spots another promising storefront and asks whether it matches the kind of shop they need. The sign identifies an apothecary, which feels like the perfect place to find fantasy potions and medicinal ingredients. He says she used restorative products frequently during her fighting days, explaining that arena injuries demanded potions even when wounds looked minor. The best mixtures were popular and sold quickly, giving Wataru a much clearer idea of what Earth collectors might value. He considers practical medicine too dangerous to market without proper testing, but training potions and recovery aids could still be worth investigating. Wataru leads E and Mariel inside, ready to see what profitable surprises this shop contains.